So I've been promising to talk to you about illustration notes as they relate to picture book texts, and we're going to look at a couple of texts where illustration notes would have been incredibly important, and also a couple of my texts just to show you a bit about how I lay my illustration notes out. So the first book to highlight is Rosie's Walk, a very old text now, a book from my own childhood. And in this story, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely get it from your library. The text is very short, way less than 100 words. And in the pictures, Rosie goes for a walk. In the words, Rosie goes for a walk across the farmyard, encountering different parts of the farmyard. And then she gets home for tea. And that's all that happens in the text. But in the background, in the pictures, what's happening is she's being followed by this fox who meets various calamities on the way. Of course, Pat Hutchins wrote and illustrated this text, so she had an advantage that she could submit both the pictures and the text together. But if you were just submitting the text, you would need to put some illustration notes in, because the text doesn't even mention that there is a fox in this story. And it certainly doesn't talk about all the misadventures that befall him. So you would need some notes submitted with this story to explain what is actually going on in the story. It isn't conveyed in the text. And a more modern example of that kind of story would be This Is Not My Hat, or any other of John Classen's picture books, which are also quite low on the word count, but have a lot going on in the story through the illustrations. So this type of story really needs illustration notes to convey more than 50% of the narrative. And in that case, you definitely need to include illustration notes. So what are we talking about in an actual text? So this is the submission text for my own book, Danny and the Dream Dog. So just to give you an idea of what we started with and how it looked at the end. So the first spread, this is Danny's dreams danced with dogs. And Howard Gray has done an absolutely incredible job of conveying how Danny is dreaming about all these beautiful dogs. And the only bit that I needed to convey in a note is that these dogs needed to look beautiful, archetypes of their breeds, because that becomes important later on in the story when Danny actually meets a real dog. Going through the text, there are no notes on the next spread. I had in my head an idea of what Mum would look like, but that didn't need to be explained at this stage in the submission process. Howard could put his own stamp on Mum and make her look totally different from how I imagined. That wasn't important for the story. So no notes, no notes, no notes. And then the next time I need some notes is on spread 5, where Danny meets Max, the dog, for the first time. And the only important bit that needed to be conveyed in the illustration notes is that Max is completely different from the dogs that Danny was dreaming about. The rest is up to Howard. And there are some notes further down, but you can see that for the first half of the text, there are very few notes, only the critical points. So the first point is to keep illustration notes to a minimum, only put them in where they're necessary for conveying part of the narrative. And in terms of how they're displayed, here's another text. Some people, like me, include their illustration notes as part of the narrative. Here you can see that they just run down, and each bit of the text, if I want it to go with a particular image that's needed for the story, then the notes are included underneath in slightly smaller italic text, so that it's easy to pick out the main text from the notes, so that a reader, when they're reading this, could skip over the notes if they weren't interested in them easily. Some people put their illustration notes in a different colour, so they'll highlight it in a different colour Some people include them in a comment or a separate column at the side. As long as whoever's looking at this and reading your submission could read through the text and take that in, and then maybe go back and look at the notes and how you've elaborated the story through the illustrations and added that extra layer. I really hope that's been helpful. Thank you for watching, and if you've got any queries, let me know.